An excellent job to gather all the guys together and get them evacuated.
Back to you, Taimur.
Dan, thanks very much indeed. Now, the reign of Muammar Gaddafi may not quite be over, but in parts of the country now under opposition control, people are already taking advantage of what they see as a new political reality. Stephanie Scowen has more.
They've not been able to speak out for decades under Muammar Gaddafi's rule. But with eastern parts of Libya now under opposition control, ordinary people are already finding their voice.
What we want is a new constitution and civil rights. What we want is what we have not had for the past 42 years. That is democracy.
In the town of Al-Marj, northeast of Benghazi, members of the newly formed Revolutionary People's Committee have taken over the studios of the local radio station. The local imam and others are using the station to broadcast pro-democracy messages and call for calm after days of chaos.
We want change, but we don't want bloodshed or killing. But we want unconditional freedom. We want the regime to withdraw peacefully, and we would guarantee them their human dignity and human rights.
While the Libyan leader still clings to power in the capital Tripoli, many hope it won't be long before he's gone. And with his departure, the freedom for everyone to say what they want. Stephanie Scowen, AlJazeera.
Now, elsewhere, protesters in Bahrain have been gathering for another opposition march on Sunday, as following a rally in the capital on Saturday night, where the country's opposition leader addressed thousands of his supporters. Hassan Mashema called for the government to respond to the people's demands for far-reaching reform. And one of the people in that square is Mohammed Al-Maskati from the Bahrain Youth Society for Human Rights. He explained a little while ago why even after some political prisoners were released by the government, they still have complaints.
Still there is a political prisoner inside jail. They get life sentence. Some of them get 3 years sentence. So still the human rights situation is not improving, and still no one starts an investigation about torture, how these people get bruising in their body, how they get beaten inside the jail. So it's still we asking for investigation. We're asking for what happened in the few days ago.
Now, powerful tribal chiefs in Yemen have joined anti-government protests and calling for President Ali Abdullah Saleh to stand down. Tens of thousands of tribesmen from Hashid and the second largest tribal federation, the Bakil, took to the streets in Emran, a tribal stronghold which is north of the capital, Sana'a. Hussein Abdullah Al-Ahmar, a key Hashid leader and a long-time ally of Saleh, announced his resignation from the ruling General People's Conference Party. But that ruling party is brushing off his resignation.
We are all tribes, and he is a Yemeni citizen like all of us. We all take part in the process of trying to come up with a practical and comprehensive solution, whether through the tribes, citizens or parties. All parts of Yemeni society are trying to come up with a way out of the crisis.
3 people have been killed in the Tunisian capital during clashes with security forces. Soldiers used tear gas to disperse the protesters, who threw stones and burned tyres. A government official blames the unrest on supporters of the ousted President Ben Ali. At least 12 people were injured, about 100 others arrested. Meanwhile, the interim Tunisian Prime Minister has spoken exclusively to Al Jazeera following Saturday's clashes. He's promised a faster transition to democracy in the country.
At this moment in time, we are trying to do our duty. Next week is going to be a decisive week, decisive in showing the roadmap and for the coming period of time, and the Tunisian people will say their word in respect of the coming period of time and what will happen in it. So we are keen to achieve this. It is not about government resignation or not resignation. The way we look at it today, we have an historic opportunity in order to achieve aims that we were dreaming of when we were young people. It's a historic opportunity to achieve democracy and also in order to get into democratic transition.
Now, in Egypt, presidential terms may in the future be limited to 8 years. That's one of the proposed changes to the constitution that will be put to a referendum ahead of elections later this year. Meanwhile, the ruling military council has apologized after security forces beat protesters during overnight demonstrations in Cairo. Thousands of people turned out in Liberation Square on Friday, calling for a faster implementation of reforms. The military council has ordered the immediate release of all people arrested. Ireland's main opposition party is all set to form the next government. The ruling Fianna Fáil party is facing its worst defeat in nearly 80 years after the electorate blamed it for the economic hardship that they're now facing. The Prime Minister in waiting, Enda Kenny, is insisting economic stability will be his first priority. In New Zealand, the mayor of Christchurch says at least a third of all buildings must be demolished and rebuilt after Tuesday's earthquake. Officials also say serious questions need to be asked about why some of the buildings collapsed. 147 people died in the quake, more than 200 are still missing. Survivors, meanwhile, have been attending Sunday services at church. An American aviation company has unveiled a spy plane prototype that's been breaking barriers in terms of size and agility. Gerald Tan has details of the new micro drone that draws its inspiration from nature.
Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Or is it the military's newest reconnaissance gadget? Innocuous in appearance, insidious by design, this tiny spycraft could come right out of a James Bond movie. It has the appearance of a hummingbird, but more importantly, moves like one. Its wings allow it to fly in almost any direction, and its size, just under 16 centimeters, lets it maneuver into tight spots, going virtually unnoticed as the video camera in its belly records the sights and sounds around it. Engineering company AeroVironment developed the pocket-sized drone for the Pentagon's research arm to the tune of $4 million.
DARPA was interested in biomimicry as it applies to small flying aircraft for potential military surveillance reconnaissance applications. And they were interested in anything that somebody came up with, whether it be a dragonfly or a hummingbird.
In its early stages 2 years ago, the microplane stayed aloft for just 20 seconds. The current model, weighing less than a AA battery, has managed 11 minutes. There's still no timeline of when or if this artificial hummingbird will take flight in the battlefield, but don't be surprised if you see it flapping soon through a window near you. Gerald Tan, AlJazeera.
The space shuttle Discovery has arrived at the International Space Station for the last time. It'll spend at least a week at the orbiting outpost, delivering a new storeroom and the first humanoid robot that is set to fly in space. Discovery is the oldest of the 3 US space shuttles. It will be retired after this mission and put into a museum. Pictures now of a moment a US coffee shop became an impromptu drive-through. The driver of that minivan lost control in Massachusetts, plowing through the front of the store, damaging almost everything inside. She claims the accelerator pedal was stuck. It was a quiet morning at the coffee shop, though. No one was injured. And finally, we're less than 24 hours away from the annual Academy Awards in Hollywood. Outside the Kodak Theater in Los Angeles, the traditional red carpet's all ready for the influx of A-list talent. It's one of TV's most watched events every year. But this year, organisers are trying to attract a younger audience, with actors James Franco and Anne Hathaway hosting the show. 10 films are nominated for Best Picture favourites, including The King's Speech, The Social Network and Inception. This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making headlines. The United Nations Security Council has unanimously voted for sanctions against Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and his inner circle. The sanctions include travel bans, an asset freeze, and an arms embargo. The US ambassador to the UN said the sanctions send a strong message.
When atrocities are committed against innocents, the international community must speak with one voice. And today, it has.
Meanwhile, protesters have taken control of most of eastern Libya, but the fighting is continuing in parts of the capital. Witnesses there say Gaddafi loyalists have been carrying out his orders to kill opponents. And reports from the third largest city in the country suggest that Misrata is now in the hands of opposition supporters. That means the movement is spreading closer to the capital, and there are reports that protesters are trying to convince government soldiers to switch sides. And in the east of the country, many of Gaddafi's properties have been ransacked and destroyed. This is an underground bunker in Al-Baida. It was built to withstand air raids. It's equipped with swimming pools, a sauna and emergency generators, and it's in the hands of the protesters. Now, in Bahrain, protesters are also gathering for another march on Sunday. That following a rally in the capital on Saturday night, where the country's opposition leader addressed thousands of his supporters. Hassan Mushayma called for the government to respond to the people's demands for reform. And in Yemen, powerful tribal chiefs have joined the anti-government movement, calling for President Ali Abdullah Saleh to step down. Tens of thousands of tribesmen from the Hashid and the second largest tribal federation, Bakil, took to the streets of Emran, which is a tribal stronghold north of the capital, Sana'a. In Tunisia, 3 people have been killed in the capital after clashes with security forces. Soldiers used tear gas to disperse protesters who were throwing stones and burning tires. A government official has blamed the unrest on supporters of the ousted President Ben Ali. At least 12 people were injured, about 100 others were arrested. Ireland's main opposition, Fine Gael party, is getting ready to form the next government following Saturday's election. The Prime Minister in waiting, Enda Kenny, says he will try to renegotiate the $113 billion bailout, which stopped Ireland from going bankrupt. Those are the headlines. The news continues on Al Jazeera in half an hour after Across the Shouting Valley.
If you're a Nokia user, you can download Al Jazeera's news widget from Nokia's Ovies store. The news widget, available on compatible Nokia devices, gives users quick and easy access to real-time news updates from Al Jazeera English. See the world in real time. Al Jazeera Mobile.
Rhythms of resistance.
A part of the struggle and popular resistance is art. Through my art, I resist. Resistance is my art, and my art is my war.
Musicians using music as a way to maintain their cultural identity.
I believe that when I sing to the world, I portray Palestine through my voice, my singing, and my songs.
Songs from the lost homeland. At this time, on Al Jazeera.
A new world driven by new media.
This is a very peculiar moment in media history.
Analyzing the media's role in shaping modern history. The Listening Post, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Unpopular with some at home, untested overseas. The first year has not been easy for David Cameron and his coalition government. In conjunction with U2, Al Jazeera asks your questions to the British Prime Minister. World View, an interview with David Cameron at this time on Al Jazeera.